Right. And so if you're not new to presuppositionalism, of course, the place that we kind of get our looking at worldviews comes from the book of Romans. And again, Paul is writing to the Roman church, a place he hasn't gone to, a place that he's been wanting to go to from his initial one. He's a Roman by birth. There's a lot of his background that is Romanesque. And here he is writing kind of, she calls it... presents the Christian message in a comprehensive way, in a really well laid out, philosophical, detailed. I mean, you can really tell the person who wrote Romans really had a good philosophical understanding of kind of the way that we do.
Arguments and all kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. It's very Greek based, and it's very well laid out. And I mean, talk about comprehensive. It only changes kind of direction in 12 where he goes, and therefore, chapter 1 through 12, and then a therefore right in the middle.
In fact,
of it.
Really, it follows Paul's pattern in many of his other writings. Right. He gives kind of the doctrine, the theology, and then he kind of applies it, right? The duty, what we should do.
And Ephesians has that same middle break and everything like that too. So Romans 1 is setting up kind of a universality of worldview, and then he breaks down like chapter 2, talking to just the Jews and bringing in Gentile believers or just Gentile people in general, and so on and so forth. But here we have Nancy Pearcey giving us that Romans 1 is Paul's Apologetics training manual. So where does Paul begin his training manual? His first major point is that all people, that means everywhere and at all times, have access to evidence for God's existence. But how? You know, if we've been on the internet as Christians more than 12 seconds, we've encountered people that said, well, provide me the evidence. Show me the peace of God in my hand. Don't give me argumentation. Show me the evidence. I want only the evidence.
Bertrand Russell, a 20th century philosopher, famously said, you know, if he was to die and stand before God, and God said, why didn't you believe? Evidence. Not enough evidence.
Not enough evidence. Shaking your finger. Yeah. Good luck.
Really.
Hope it works out for you. So what is this evidence? How are we given this evidence? Well, it's through the creative order. And there are two avenues of this, and both of them are revelatory in the sense that they tell us something. So one is through the general revelation, and that's accessible to anybody. So again, general, like a deterrence. If you've studied criminality, there's general and specific deterrence. General is kind of the punishment is carried out before people so that it tells people not to do this or you'll face similar consequences. And then specific is to a single person alone. So you put somebody in jail, you stop them from deterring or from causing a crime.
So the general evidence then, or the general revelation is the created order.
Right.
Everything that we see and everything that we're exposed to and that sort of thing.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Everything belongs under God's worldview. And so anytime you point to anything, that's evidence for God. But then special revelation is kind of what we call salvation. So God's
scriptures, right? They're the special. Now God reveals generally throughout the whole world. The scriptures then are a special revelation, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's him speaking specifically to a people in time, and he's kind of clarifying, drawing out principles from his will. So we start with, we all have access to evidence for God through creation. And this is Romans 19 through 20. What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. This means all people. Verse 20, his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made.
So that's kind of interesting. Right? All of this is it's evidence. It's clear, perceived, right? By since the creation of the world, right? So everybody has access to this evidence, external evidence that God provides in creation.
So both the physical nature and human nature give evidence to our Creator. So
yes, because we're part of creation as well, right?
Yeah, sadly, we are creatures just as much as the frog or the rock. So the universe cannot be explained as a product of nature alone because the origin of the universe and the origin of life, it doesn't allow for the non-living material to create living material, although that's obviously contested within the evolutionary framework. But again, I'd point back to Mitch Stokes' How to Be an Atheist, that book that we did for kind of further explanation on kind of the claims here.
Yeah, and the point she's trying to make, I think, here is that, the universe can't explain itself. Right. In other words, it's not. It can't be a product, she says, of natural causes alone. Mm-hmm. There has to be something outside of it that's caused it. Right. That's what she's getting at here.
So we have things like the fine-tuning problem, which is, everything seems really well set up for life in the universe, in our world, closeness to the sun, the type of life that has been produced, just how life seems to carry on, and how there are different defenses techniques. There's different ways that people and animals habitate and continue the species. So there just seems to be a lot working in our favor to keep us alive.
Yeah. Well, and so the basic idea of the fine-tuning argument really is that it seems as if Earth, has been fine-tuned for life, to have life on it, right? And so all the various forces, the four major forces, and that sort of thing, all have to be in exactly a particular spectrum in order for life to exist, right? And the various chemical reactions, all that kind of stuff, gravity, that kind of stuff has to be exactly the way it is. We have to have a certain distance from the sun in order for water to exist on the earth, and that sort of thing. And so there's these various things that seem to indicate that the earth is fine-tuned in order for life to exist, right? This is kind of like a one of those arguments, the teleological argument. Right. So the teleological argument argues that based on how things are organized, that there's an intelligence behind it. Mm-hmm. That's the idea here.
Right. So she goes on to say the puzzling thing too, the problem of the fine-tuning problem is that there's no physical cause to explain it. There's not a machine in the sky that we can look to that is rearranging, the moon a certain distance away. It seems like, a belief in the Big Bang, a giant explosion happens, and then you have from there a sequential event where, elements form, stars form, planets form, life forms. All these things just seem to happen in kind of perfect quantities and perfect qualities, and we're here as a result of so many different oopsies along the way, and
or seemingly oopsies,
right. Very, very scientific in there. That's the oopsie problem.
The oopsie issue.
So she quotes here as physicist Paul Davies says, "It's almost as if a grand designer has figured it all out, but we know that's not the case." So we'll continue on.